from Washington, D.C. Rohit, thank you for your time. It does appear that every passing day, I won't even say day, but perhaps hours and minutes now, the race seems to be getting only tighter. A narrative on one hand that look at who has been projected by the Democrats here, a woman of color against Donald Trump, who's obviously not got age on his side. Kamala Harris has at least got age on his side. And this is the kind of narrative that has been spun. But the fact of the matter is that there are many disadvantages as well when it comes to Kamala Harris. A section being seen her as somebody with a lot of, as a political liability in that sense. And that's the reason why many believe that perhaps it is the time for Trump to return, isn't it?
Good morning, Sneha. Yes, absolutely. Behind me, if you could see, I'm standing right in front of the Capitol Hill. I mean, January 6th, pretty fresh in some people's a lot of people have talked about, especially here in Washington, D.C., about, they remember what had happened on January 6th, and, they're not forgetting what happened. But as soon as you leave D.C. and you move out of Washington, D.C., you go to some of these battleground states like Pennsylvania, where we have been, to Michigan, where we have been. You try to understand why people want Trump back. And I think it's the economy, it's the inflation. People are worried about, making sure that they have jobs and money. And I think that message of Donald Trump that, we were talking about earlier when we began the show, about him telling people that, were you better off 4 years ago? And that's the reason why I think a lot of people have forgotten, the Trump presidency years. I think they only remember the good, which was economy, it was jobs, no wars. Those are the things that messaging has brought Donald Trump back into this race in a big, big way. Mm-hmm. And look, there are so many polls coming out now. There's almost at every hour we get an update. She's leading by 1 point, or Donald Trump's, gaining another point. But nobody knows what's going to happen on Tuesday. And this is why it makes this American election absolutely fascinating. Not one pollster can pinpoint and stick their neck out and say that one of the candidates going to win. Kamala Harris, we know for a fact, is doing what she can. She's been traveling all the battleground states. On the eve of election night, she's going to be in Georgia, which is a big deal. She's trying to send a message to Donald Trump and their campaign by suggesting that Georgia is still in play, although the polls have her, losing that state by 2 or 3 points. But remember, none of these polls are accurate. They're all within the margin of error. Just got a tweet, and a message from Democratic operatives saying that we are back in the game in North Carolina. So these battleground states have kept everybody on their toes. And what we have done with our ground reporting, talking to some of these voters, talking to some Democrats and Republicans, on both on the campaign side of things, there is nervous energy in both the camps, comparing this election to the election of John F. Kennedy in the 60s. So we do not know. I think America is keeping everybody in the world on the edge. But hopefully, it looks like by Tuesday afternoon or evening, we'll start getting some inputs as to where this election will lead. A lot of Indian Americans are breaking apart from the Democrats. They are going to be voting for Donald Trump. We've talked to a lot of them. They are registering themselves as independents. And that is why we saw that tweet from Donald Trump the other day, where he was appealing to Indian Americans, specifically invoking the name of India, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi invoking attacks on Hindu temples, trying to see if he could get their votes to win this all-consequential election. And look, as Padma Lakshmi was saying earlier on the show, it's a choice that America has to make. There are two clear paths, but looks like that emotional message is not going too far. I think Americans are more worried about domestic issues, abortion, inflation, open borders, immigration, and of course, economies now.
Well, absolutely. You put that so well, Rohit, summing this up pretty much, that these are the issues that bother Americans. Inflation, why not? Post-COVID, post-19, post-2020 essentially is when we've seen the inflation rate soar in the U.S. like it has in many other parts of the world. It's obviously an aftermath of the pandemic that Biden had to tackle with, and Biden had to deal with, and that's the reason why there is advantage Trump here. At least Trump saying that, look at what was the situation 4 years ago, and that is not something that Trump had to deal with, isn't it? So economy, inflation, unemployment, price rise, these are going to be, a handful of major factors that will be, in fact, be seen really as the deciding factors in these elections, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. It is all domestic. We talked about how these wars and funding of these wars. Nobody on the ground is talking about any of that. I spoke to one person who is a Republican voting for Kamala Harris, and her reason for voting for Kamala Harris was, she's talking about women's rights. On the other hand, I also spoke to a Democrat who's voting, for President Trump, and their reason to vote for President Trump was, jobs and economy and inflation. So I think we have this new coalitions that are emerging, Sneha. Nobody thought 4 years ago, or even 8 years ago when Donald Trump was running for the first time in 2016, that he would have black men on his side and Latinos on his side and Indian American voters on his side. This is a coalition that's usually seen with the Democrats. On the other hand, Kamala Harris has gained a lot of support from older white women and women in general. White women cost Hillary Clinton the 2016 election, but they're overwhelmingly supporting Kamala Harris. And this is exactly why this race is too close. Another point that I want to bring and talk about it is the silent majority, Sneha. A lot of people do not want to identify as Donald Trump supporters. They think, they'll be tagged as xenophobes and whatnot. So they're keeping quiet. And the Trump campaign tells me that they're banking on these voters to show up on election day and vote for Donald Trump. Similarly, for Kamala Harris, and their campaign is saying that there are women voters who are not getting registered in polls, and they're hoping that these women voters in suburban areas in Pennsylvania and Michigan, in Arizona, in Georgia would show up and vote for Kamala Harris. So it is a very, very close election, but at the heart of it is how America is looking internally. They're not worried about what's going on in Gaza. They're not really worried about the Ukraine and Russia war. They're not worried about any other thing. They're looking internally, and they're looking at the issues that the common American faces every single day. And the fact of the matter is that, yes, the economy was great under Donald Trump. There was no inflation. There were no issues about jobs. And that is why we're seeing Donald Trump in such a strong position in this election.
All right, domestic issues is in fact of main concern to Americans this time, and they cast their vote. On top of the agenda, on top of their priority list rather, is going to be issues of inflation, unemployment, job creation. These issues that affect them directly is what Rohit is telling us. Rohit, I'm going to thank you for the moment for joining in with your views on that big story that we're tracking very closely.